All right. I guess it's time to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this fireside chat with our cookie experts, where you can ask us anything. My name is Shruti Koparkar. I am the head of product marketing here at Quantcast, and today I will be your host. In the first 30 minutes or so, I am going to ask questions to our cookie experts. These are questions we have heard from our clients in multiple different conversations. Then we will open it up to the audience to ask, again, any questions that you might want about this cookie conundrum. So please enter your questions as we go through this conversation. We are really looking forward to a rich discussion. For those of you who might be new to Quantcast or who haven't been in touch with your sales rep in a long time, Quantcast is a global advertising technology company. We have 20 offices across 10 countries. We build products and services for brands, agencies, as well as publishers to help them know and grow their audiences. Our flagship offering is the Quantcast platform. For publishers, this provides audience, content, and campaign insights, as well as monetization capabilities. And for marketers, this provides end-to-end campaign planning, activation, measurement, and innovation capabilities. So with that, please join me in welcoming our cookie experts. We are joined today by Heinz Baumann. He is the head of product management focused on privacy and identity products, and Durbin Fraser, who is our director of engineering, and he leads the teams, the technology and engineering teams dedicated to these efforts. So thank you for joining me, Durbin and Heinz.
Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome, everybody.
Okay, all right. So let's get right into it. The first set of questions I have are really around the changes and the trends in this space. And to kick us off, let's start with a really fundamental question. What exactly are third-party cookies? What do they do? And how are they different from first-party cookies?
Okay, maybe I start.
Yeah.
So this is a question we hear quite often from clients and asking kind of what is this and how does it work? I give you kind of the high level definition of this, and Durbin will then go into kind of more detail kind of what we do and what we're seeing with third-party cookies. So a third-party cookie is a cookie that is placed in the browser's cookie store, accessible to all web pages, compared to a first party, which is only available to the actual web page where it was stored. The third-party cookie allows the cookie to be read by a vendor's code from any site visited, as long as the respective code from that vendor is present on the page. So a typical use case is to observe traffic across multiple sites, like we at Quantcast. If you're familiar with Quantcast Measure, Measure puts a third-party cookie on your browser, and that kind of ID that's in there can be reused on all the different pages where there is Measure present, and we can actually then correlate these together when we receive that data. I hand it over to Durbin to get to dive a little deeper into this.
Right. So as Heinz said, it's an identifier that can be stored on a user's computer that can be accessed from multiple different sites. So for example, if site A and site B both use Quantcast, then Quantcast can store a third-party cookie from either of those sites and can read that same third-party cookie from either of those sites. And from that, you can do a lot of powerful things. For example, if I show an ad on site A, and then the person who saw the ad then goes and converts on site B, we can say there's a clear link here. Someone saw an ad and then converted. And from that, we can say, well, site A is a useful place to buy inventory. And we can say the way in which we were buying inventory is helping the marketer by driving those ads on site B. Now, it's useful, even now, though it's an imperfect solution. Third-party cookies get deleted, bunch of cases where they're not even created. There's a bunch of problems with them, that they remain on a single device. So there are, even with the existence of those cookies, there's still problems with them, flaws in it, and that can lead to missed or incorrect attribution, it introduces some errors in modeling. So this is a comparison to first-party cookies, which comes up a lot. And it's important to understand the distinction between third-party cookies and first-party cookies. So third-party cookies are something that we use across different sites, and these are things that are going away. Safari has already removed them, and Chrome has plans to remove them sometime next year. However, first-party cookies are only accessible from within a single site. So for example, if you're on site A, then you can then people who have code running on site A can set a cookie and they can read it in a first-party context, but they can only see that cookie on site A. So if someone goes to site A, Quantcast could set and read a cookie, or the publisher of that site could set and read the cookie. But when the user goes to site B, they get a brand new cookie, and there is no way for someone on site B to go and look at what was set on site A. So these first-party cookies are sticking around. They allow publishers and other companies to see what's happening within that particular site, but you cannot share that ID across different sites.
That's very helpful. Okay, so now that we understand the basics of like the third-party cookies versus first-party cookies, can you both talk a little bit about how this deprecation of third-party cookies is going to impact the ad tech ecosystem? In particular, how it's going to impact the functioning and interoperability of systems like a DMP or a DSP, SSP, so on and so forth.
Sure. So as you probably expect, third-party cookie going away will be quite a little bit of a change to our ecosystem that we have in the ad tech industry. So let me start first with a simple use case to illustrate what's happening today, kind of following up what Durbin just said, and then how that impacts and what are different options that are floating around that could try to solve this. So a common case is for third-party cookie to store an ID, as Durbin just mentioned. In the case of Quantcast, we store an anonymized ID in a third-party space. It helps us observe activities on the publisher side and allows us to build a model to help serve better quality ads to the user. We also use that same cookie to match the ad click-through or ad conversion on the marketer page. So with the third-party cookie going away, you can imagine now we no longer have that kind of glue between the two sites. So we need something else. So we need to look at a different approach to pass some sort of an identifier to build our models. To make this all work in a world without third-party cookies, we'll need to invent alternative approaches to correlate the user on the publisher side with the user on the advertiser brand side. So there are many different approaches getting developed. You probably heard many of these already in other places. So there is, cohorts, there's contextual, there is deterministic IDs, there are probabilistic IDs, and there's probably about a dozen other ones that I don't have listed here that are floating around and trying to see how can we solve this. So Durbin can deep dive again into kind of more the technical details here, how this actually is going to work and what we try to do.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I give a little more detail on some of these approaches. So one of the common approaches being worked on is creating identifiers based on email addresses. And one common approach here would be, say, with DMPs, where the data management platform has a lot of data that's keyed off of email addresses from the people that they have been working with to collect data and share. The big drawback to this approach is that a lot of publishers don't have a large sign-in rate, if they have one at all. For the very large publishers who have very valuable content that they're sharing with their users and can leverage that to drive a high sign-in rate, they can continue to get some value out of DMPs and being able to match this data. But the smaller publishers are going to struggle even more with no longer being able to easily match the data of their users with the data in these DMPs. One approach that we're seeing a rise in here is an increase in CDPs, consumer data platforms. These are more focused on providing a direct integration with a marketer or with a publisher, focused more on first-party data. Unfortunately, they have not really solved the challenge of modeling and reporting behaviors across site. They can comment more about what's happening within your site. They can help a publisher match their own data on their users, but still have challenges being able to say this is what happened between your site and someone else's site. Ultimately, one of the big ways of addressing this is by the publishers being able to collect more information from their users and form tighter connections with them. They will need to be able to show more and more of the value that they get to the users and be able to encourage those users to log in and give the user something that the user is willing to get in exchange for their information.
That makes sense. What about measurement? How will it be impacted? Can click attribution still work? Durbin, maybe you want to.
Sure. So attribution will still be available after third parties go away. And at a very high level, things like this campaign spent X dollars and then got Y conversions will still be available. However, the technical details and the way in which we go about collecting those insights and being able to report them is going to change. For example, both Safari and Chrome have proposals for how publishers and marketers might do this conversion reporting in an anonymous way. Safari has already built into their browser private click measurement. Chrome has a proposal for Fledge, which punts on the problem a little bit, but includes in their long-term roadmap. Here we want to start being able to make these clicks and conversions more anonymous. They do this by, instead of having the browser directly report to the DSP or to the advertiser when a click happens, aggregating it, anonymizing it, and then being able to say, sometime shortly after, this click or this conversion is attributed to this particular website. There are also several other approaches. For example, for very large campaigns, using panels, where you can see, but by getting a list of panelists, who's actually engaging and being able to make measurements there. Challenge there, it needs to be very large campaigns. You can use statistical methods to fill in the gaps and estimate the total number of conversions there are. One of the things that Quantcast is working on, and we released an alpha version, is a approach to this with an alpha version of our conversion reporting. And this does not rely on third-party cookies in our platform, where we can say, based off of the ads we've shown, here's the aggregate number of conversions that we believe we've driven.
Great. That sounds interesting, exciting. Maybe we'll talk. We'll come back to that a little bit. The cookieless conversion reports. So no conversation about the changes would be complete without addressing the most recent sort of change that has been announced by Apple with its iOS 15 update and the privacy-related sort of updates that they have talked about. Can you guys talk a little bit about what those were and how they impact advertising?
Sure. So to me, the latest changes that Apple announced at last week's Worldwide Developer Conference are not a surprise. Apple already supports tracking prevention with on their mobile apps with the ADT they put in, so the pop-up that you see now on all the mobile apps. And they also have a block tracker feature in Safari today. So they just, they continue expand what they already have. Now in Safari, they're going to add hiding the IP address to disallow companies to use the IP address in a useful means. They also now added in an offering to obfuscate the email address for iCloud Plus users. So they just continue working on making this more, they put privacy at the forefront for the end users, which are consumers. So how will that impact advertising? Well, obviously there's a lot of companies who use the IP address for some way or the other. And so that's going to be kind of quite difficult to match traffic, for instance, from the same browser. Those who depend on email addresses will potentially have a problem for all the iCloud Plus users who use the obfuscation of the email address, that there's no clear email address anymore that will come. So I think all of us need to kind of start to rethink on how we can analyze traffic coming from Safari browsers if we're not having these tools available.
Durbin?
Yeah, again, this isn't a particular surprise. This is quite in line with the privacy push that the industry has been engaged in for well over a year now. I think this just kind of adds a bit more evidence and a bit more fuel to the, yes, we need to make progress and we need to continue to be engaged in working on protecting people's privacy and being able to drive revenues to the publishers while maintaining that privacy. It's in line with Google's approaches and with past work that Apple's already done. One of the differences here is that this is a bit more forces that everything that's happening in those users' browsers where they've turned on this IP tracking is blocked, not just those publishers or exchanges that have engaged in the private methods, but it means now there's less loopholes that publishers and marketers can get around.
Awesome. I really like what you said, Durbin, about being able to drive more revenue to publishers while still focusing on privacy, because ultimately it is this content that entertains and educates from our publisher community that keeps the internet engaging for users, and then it's the advertising that can power that free and open sort of an internet. So certainly something that Quantcast is heavily investing in, and to ensure that we help both sides of this sort of ecosystem, both the publishers as well as marketers. Okay, so moving on to the various different solutions have been proposed in this space, as you guys actually have already kind of talked about. But to really find a sustainable solution that can work for us as an industry, it is important to be able to build these solutions to certain common standards that we are working towards. And I know that the two of you and your teams have been part of multiple of these sort of industry standards working groups to help define, but also help stay updated on what's going on in this space. Can you talk a little bit about those, like namely Project REARC? I know pre-bid, you've been involved with W3C. It'll be really helpful to understand what work is going on in those groups.
Sure. As Shruti just mentioned, Quantcast is invests quite a bit into working in these industry groups to build, like our slogan is, an open internet for everybody. And these industry groups are all moving in that direction to help keep that open. So myself, I'm in the IB Tech Lab Privacy and React Commit group, and in some of the other private working groups they have. So I can maybe dive into the Project REARC, sorry. The Project REARC came out of months after Chrome announced that they're removing the third-party cookies. There was kind of, oh my God, what are we going to do? And that kind of kickstarted that the industry came together. We need to figure out how we can solve that problem. So today, this is kind of drives standards through IAB to define around addressability and accountability throughout the ad tech industry. As I said, it specifically came up for the world without third-party cookies, but there are areas in that, in the accountability as well in the addressability, that are actually useful in general, making sure that we are addressing privacy of the consumer. We making sure that we can track that the privacy consent was given, and we know across the entire ecosystem that this is true for a request that was made. So major initiatives out of the REARC is the UID2 work. It's an open source deterministic ID solution was originally developed by the Trade Desk and is getting handed over to the IB Tech Lab. That's in the works to get the handoff going, and then it's going to be open source and available to everybody. There is, as I mentioned, accountability initiatives, tracking, privacy-related information, and other information that gets worked on. There's quite a lot on the big potpourri of this. There's specs out that you can review on the IB Tech Lab's webpage. Then the other industry group that I'm involved with is W3C, which is the group that kind of defines the internet protocol and the standards. Heavily driven by, obviously, you know, the browser developers, you know, Google, Apple, and the people around Mozilla Firefox. There, a lot of the time at the moment is spent to really understand, because, you know, let me step back, because it's driven by these browser developers, and one of them, Google, comes out with Flock and this cohort-based solution. A lot of the time at the moment is spent to really understand the potential viability of how Flock is going to work. But there's also quite a potpourri of other people coming in with other alternative solutions. Like there's Swan, which is anonymized ID that is server-based. There are some other proposals that get looked at. So everything comes together, because at the end of the day, when it comes there, this group is looking into making it a standard that will be then embraced in all the browsers. And there's another, you know, piece that is available. So that's kind of where everything goes on in that group. It's a large group, very technical, but it's, you know, you get the head information about what's going on, specifically around Google and Safari on the Apple side. I think Durbin is involved with the pre-bit, and you can talk a little bit about what's happening over there.
Sure. So pre-bit is another one of these organizations. One of the advantages pre-bit has, that's an open source organization. So it actually provides a lot of the software that publishers use to send requests to the exchanges and make their inventory available in RTB. One exchange of note that they don't include is Google. So you've got Google writing their own software, their own exchange, and then you have a lot of other exchanges that are kind of banded together and use pre-bit as a way for publishers to send inventory into these exchanges. They've got several things that pre-bit is working on. Some examples, Pub Common ID, which is a simple publisher extension that allows publishers to share their same site information, the first party cookies, with the DSPs, which then allows DSPs and marketers to do things such as within site frequency capping, being able to dictate what order to show ads on that particular site, show things like brand lift surveys after the ad is shown, use information about other things the user has done within that same site in order to improve their targeting. Heinz called it UID 2.0. There's a group within pre-bid that is working on the development of that and the operating of the 2.0 system. And another one working on a single sign-on service for helping publishers to collect email addresses and power collecting the emails that go into UID 2. Also, there's a set of work in pre-bid as well as others to make it easier for publishers to expose things like audience segments, saying that based off what a person has done on that publisher's site, here's the different types of segments that person should be in. They're high-income female, or they're interested in expensive cars, or things like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That has been really helpful. I'd like to now turn our attention to the Quantcast approach. We've discussed in the past, and we've talked to our clients about, you know, the 3 I's, so to speak, of our approach, which is industry standards, and you guys just talked about that. interoperability, which is this idea that we've built the Quantcast platform to be able to take in any of these external identifier signals like UID 2.0 or Google's Flock or anything else, primarily because we see that there's no one size fits all. It's really important to acknowledge that the future might see multiple of these identifier signals play a role, and we have to meet our customers where they are at in terms of supporting whatever identifiers seem to work for them. But then the really important piece is that of innovation, which is taking all of these external identifier signals and using AI and machine learning and statistical methods to marry them with some unique sort of Quantcast differentiators, which is the first party signals or consent signals or contextual signals. So can you maybe talk a little bit about what role first party signals play in our approach, in the Quantcast approach to to future proof against this like deprecation of third party cookies?
Sure. So first-party data, which is going to play a key role going forward. Means we're removing the third-party data. What that means is the first-party data is data that flows directly from the publisher to the chosen vendor, and only that data set. So this is kind of for it's not mixed with other data. So with that, vendor like us, Quantcast, we can create audience graphs and other measurements from that data. The ability is to leverage first-party data requires a direct connection with the publisher. At Quantcast, we're currently strengthening our relationship with publishers by offering new products like the marketplace, which allows publishers to connect directly with advertisers, hence empowering the publisher and giving them more power into their hands. And Durbin can go a little more, but like always, the technical person always goes into the details on the approach, right? Just give the high level overview what we do.
Yeah, it works very well.
Well, I think I mentioned a bunch of the things that we can do with first party cookies when I was just talking about the pub common ID earlier. Again, the importance of first party data is certainly growing as third party cookies go away and the data associated with them goes away. Then there's going to be more of a focus on it. Publishers who have larger sites and who have customers more engaged will have stronger, higher quality first party data, which will allow them and people and marketers buying from their sites to do more of that data. Publishers that have very small sites where people hit once and then quickly go away are going to have a lot more trouble being able to monetize those particular users. But yeah, with first party data, we can do a lot of things like sequencing, frequency capping, inferring what sort of interest the user has, and we can make a lot of targeting decisions based off of that.
Awesome. What about contextual signals, Durbin? Like, what role do they play?
Sure. I mean, contextual is nothing new. It's historically, many campaigns have included some sort of element of contextual. For example, even if you are targeting someone who in general is a person who's interested in buying tires sometime soon, you're going to choose to serve that more on sites that are about cars or about auto repair, and you are likely less going to serve on a site that's about cooking or about playgrounds. And there's always been a component of pretty much all the targeting we do. There are some cases where it's much more explicit, where a marketer says, I very much want to target just on sites about this particular thing. And in some cases, it's more implicit, where we want to try and do the best possible, and we allow our modeling to use it as one of several signals. Again, as third-party cookies go away, contextual information becomes more valuable. That there are new products, as we've heard from more and more marketers as they get more interested in some of the contextual focused approaches. But in general, contextual is something we've been using in a lot of our campaigns and something we continue to do.
Yeah, you mentioned that marketers are, getting more and more interested in how they can leverage contextual signals contextual technology more intelligently. And I know that this is also true of our publishers who do see the value of these contextual segments now. What is Quantcast, how is Quantcast helping publishers thrive in a cookieless world?
Well, again, with some of the things we've typically done, helping them understand their audience, show how the ads on their site are driving performance for marketers, making it possible for them to transact on their inventory based off first-party data. Again, the publisher plays a very important role here. The more engaged the customer is with the publisher, the more information the publisher gets, and the easier that makes it to do accurate targeting. We're helping publishers monetize. We've typically had one set of technology for the publishers that have been tied to, are then purchasing on them via third-party cookies. We've been replacing that with ROTB identity modules that allow us to link the inventory from the publisher directly to the audience insights and data that we were collecting via our measure tag. So that makes it easier for us to purchase and buy from those publishers and help them monetize that inventory.
That's great. So shifting back to marketers a little bit, Heinz, earlier we talked about, I think Durbin mentioned the Cookieless conversion report that is available in the platform today. Can you talk a little bit about, what those are and how they work?
Sure. So as the, Cookieless conversion report says, it's a conversion report. And what we do there is we use our Era machine learning engine to correlate the clicked ad on the publisher page to the ad fulfillment on the marketer page without using a third-party cookie. So we have, worked on an approach to, how can we do this without a third-party cookie? So we're using our Era machine learning engine to create and correlate these two pieces together so we can create a conversion report. So the current state is in the platform available. It shows a conversion where we used first piece is where it shows how the conversion using third-party cookies. And then there's a comparison of what our ID graph was able to achieve that comes out of the machine learning engine. And then you can see kind of how this compares. And it's still in early stages, but the latest results are very promising, and we are continuing to improve the algorithm and also plan to add additional report visualization to the product to better, visualize what we actually doing and what the results are. But it looks very, very promising. Clients that we show it to are very happy to see actual results, which we're really happy with, and they're, I think we're on a very good track on this.
That's great. So, just to conclude this, because we are a little past the 30-minute mark, actually, how can our customers get involved? Like, how can they prepare for the third-party cookie dead, but how can they also get involved in the various efforts that Quantcast is undertaking?
Yeah, so we're very open to working with clients like everybody here on the call. We are currently running in-house campaigns to test our matching algorithm without third-party cookies. As I mentioned, using our Era machine learning engine. We also launched an alpha program where we work with a few marketers at the moment to test their prospecting campaigns as well. For each alpha partner, and that's what becomes interesting for some of you in the audience, for each alpha partner, the program starts with an introductory meeting where we do a deep dive into our approach and an update on current progress. We're listening to the market's concerns and answering their questions. The feedback we're getting from these intro sessions are overwhelmingly positive. After this intro, we then follow up with an evaluation form that will help the marketer to get a better understanding how ready they are in regard to the future without third-party cookies. Once we receive that back, we can use that data to make sure that we can run the campaigns that we want to run. And it also gives the marketer the view into how ready they are to into the future. So do they need to do any changes? Do they need, anything they need to update on their own end? This is a great opportunity for anybody who wants to participate to closely be involved in building the future of a cookieless world. So if you are interested, feel free to reach out to us.
Great. Okay, so we are now going to open it up to the audience. I already see there are a number of questions that have come in. We actually also have some questions that have been written in because few of our customers from the APAC region couldn't attend. But I'm going to start with the ones that we see in the box here. So let's get started. Okay, so I think Domenico asks, are digital identity providers essentially creating a co-op of willing publishers and ad networks that have first-party login data and local first-party cookies that is then unified centrally and matched to a specific advertiser's first-party CRM data? So I guess the question is there a co-op sort of being created where all of this data flows in?
Sure. I'll take that one, Shruti. There are many different efforts here. Well, what you're describing has some parts and a couple different ones. For example, UID 2.0 is one where publishers and ad networks can take email addresses, first-party login data, and use that and kind of create a co-op. That's not quite unified essentially, as we're not all just putting it in and having one person manage all of that data. But that is certainly an area where multiple different willing publishers and advertisers come together and say, yes, we're going to transact on these IDs based on first-party data. I would call out that there are some pieces of that are sort of managed centrally, which is things like the security keys to make sure that no one is able to reverse engineer just willy-nilly all of the emails and get into users' privacy. So making sure that the actors in that system remain good and don't leak private information.
Great. Thanks, Durbin. Okay, next question is, what are the best practices when creating first-party cookies?
So there's a few things here. It depends on exactly how you're creating the cookie, what system you're using to do that. To get really into the weeds, there's two types of first-party cookies. There's one set by the server and one set by JavaScript on your website. And you want to use those two different ones in different cases. The server-side ones are tend to be a bit stickier, but they also require a lot more work to implement and require making much more deep changes to your stack. At a high level, the important thing is the typical due diligence when you're installing code on your website. Make sure that the code you're installing is from a vendor you trust. Make sure you understand what it's actually doing and that it follows typical guidance. Like if it's setting and saving data in Europe, it has to have GDPR. In other places, it should have the appropriate consent and user buy-in. You should make sure that that vendor is not just passing your data to the random web, but to other companies that you trust, or keeping entirely within themselves.
Makes sense. Okay, next question. What triggered the removal of third-party cookies? Heinz, maybe you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, I think that there's a desire by especially the browsers to eliminate kind of the widely used kind of, or this kind of in quotes leak in the browser, where you can put something in a place like I explained earlier, where other pages can actually just access it. I can re-access that information. There is pressure on the browser developers, also on stronger privacy coming from consumers, coming from consumers groups, coming from privacy advocates, coming from law enforcement. So that kind of triggered that they want to get rid of that kind of leak in quotes, right?
Yeah.
The cookie himself is a little bit of a problem too in the world of browsers. It's kind of one of the first things that was created, and it's an area that they want to get moving away from, and providing a more secure way to do to share or create the output that the third-party cookie helped to create.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Essentially, it does sound like it was a change initiated by browsers, starting with maybe Safari, Firefox followed, and now, of course, Google Chrome. Okay. With the removal of third-party cookies, does that mean ad servers will no longer be able to track view through conversions? Ryan asks this question. So will view through conversions continue to exist, and can we keep tracking them as an industry?
So the mechanism we use today, which is a third-party cookie, is going away. So as I mentioned earlier, you can still track conversions, but the approaches to them change notably. For example, instead of being able to measure directly on each view conversion, needing to use things like panels or modeling in order to kind of fill that in. And that's, I mentioned that earlier. There are some approaches specifically to click conversions on the private click measurement and in Fledge. There are other approaches that can help with view conversions, but they require a lot of modeling and machine learning, and or large campaigns that you can be supplemented with panels in order to measure at least a sample of those conversions directly.
Awesome. Thank you. Mark asks, so what will happen to Quantcast data metrics about consumer visits and profiles?
All right, I can take that one as well. I mean, we will continue to provide data metrics about consumer visits and profiles.
Yeah.
The approaches that we're using for the targeting that we're working on right now, and for being able to track things, will need modification, depending on what it is. For example, being able to say this is the number of visits or number of different users who went to your particular site, that just continues to work. You can do that using first-party cookies. The questions about profiles and how do you say things like this particular group of people were interested in bacon or so forth. Those are the things that are changing a bit. Using third-party cookies is no longer viable. So being able to make general estimates of here's how many bacon lovers visited your site require a bit more modeling and a bit more different data sets that we can bring in. But we are working on changing those profiles to work without third-party cookies as well.
Makes sense. Can you share more details regarding the RTB identity model and how that relates to Quantcast? I'm not sure which one of you would like to. I'm not actually quite sure exactly what we mean by RTB identity model either.
Well, there's a couple different ones. There's one in particular that Quantcast has for our buying and working with publishers directly, and we've created that the Quantcast identity module, which is a module available in pre-bid and with the pre-bid exchanges. So we've had a long history of working with publishers to be able to say things about their sites, and that ID module helps link that data from the publisher side to where our measure tag lives, to the RTB side, so that instead of just saying, well, here's the group of people that are interested in bacon, again, I've had breakfast recently.
Yeah.
These are people who have bacon. Here's where in the state they go. It then allows us to actually purchase those ads via RTB. So we can help the publisher. We can directly help the publisher monetize. No longer just giving them insights and then buying via third-party cookies. That ID module helps us then buy by being able to link using first-party cookies directly from that measure tag and from that information we gathered. Now, in the case that Vanessa was talking about, other ID modules, UID 2.0 is another one. There are several other ID modules as well. LiveRamp, many other ID providers have these RTB models. Our solution is not to just only build our own, but to take in other data sources as they're available. So for example, we are watching UID 2.0 and plan to participate in that as it grows and actually starts getting a sizable amount of publishers contributing to it.
Great, thank you. What data exactly the AI engine does the AI engine operate on? In this world without third-party cookies, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, Janice. It's essentially, it's the first-party signals. It's consent, of course, because we don't really do anything without first, checking for consent. It's contextual signals. We will interoperate with independent identifiers such as UID 2.0. We will interoperate with cohort-based solutions such as Flock. And then, of course, there are a lot of other signals like date, time, location, device, and so on and so forth. So all of that data, there is incomplete information in isolation. So no one single sort of source of data is useful. It's about taking all of it, taking multiple signals, and then combining them through that statistical approach with our AI engine. I think that hopefully that does justice. Anything you'd like to add, Durbin or Heinz? Awesome. So this may probably not really a question, but a comment. UID 2.0 was declared dead by Google 2 weeks ago. I'm not quite sure what Patrick is referring to. Any comments there, Durbin or Heinz?
The one comment. Go ahead, Heinz.
Yeah, go ahead, Durbin.
I'll leave most of the Heinz. The one comment I'd make here is, again, the important thing is that the relationship between the publisher and the customer. As long as the publishers can form strong relationships with their consumers and make the value trade with them strong, then they will be able to continue to survive and use these approaches. One of the things that is really changing with the third-party cookies is it's putting more power and also onus on the publishers. They are the ones who get the data that can then power the rest of the system. I do not think Google's going to be able to block that if the publishers can make good relationships and get buy-in from their customers.
Yeah, well said. Okay, moving on. What types of tech partners are you looking to engage with to establish better contextual relevancy? And what platforms from DSP side do you see leading in the new world of data with privacy? I can maybe first of all answer just a little bit. I'm a marketing person, so I will pass it on to our experts. But in terms of contextual relevancy, Quantcast actually has significant expertise in this field. We've started back in 2006 with being able to provide audience, but also content insights to our publishers. And over the years, we've really improved our approach there. We now are able to scan billions of URLs, process them with natural language processing to really understand what the content on those is, and then use machine learning to be able to categorize them or classify them in this really high dimensional space to really understand the nuances and differences between the various types of content. That being said, I know that the engineering team would be open to exploring technical partnerships. So if there's something where you think you could be a good technology partner, sure, do reach out to us. In terms of like the DSP side, what what kind of platforms from the DSP side do we see leading in the world of data with privacy? Well, certainly platforms that have consent and privacy built into them are something that, we, not only because we have done that and we are, we have built a platform like that, but also because that is where the world is going. So we talk to clients often about why it's so important that the privacy sort of is built in with a cookieless approach. So privacy and identity in some sense go hand in hand. And we've done that with the Quantcast platform. The other thing to note is that any platforms that are more integrated, where you don't have to rely on external data and where the data comes packaged in. So basically more vertically and horizontally integrated are some that will thrive more in a world without third-party cookies, because as Heinz and Durbin mentioned, the glue that is sort of holding this whole ad tech ecosystem together is sort of withering away with the demise of third-party cookies. So any platforms that can offer a more integrated offering on the DSP side, I think will be more successful. At least that's what we are sort of betting on, and that's the platform we are building. Anything to add there, Durbin or Heinz?
I'm glad we have you here for marketing.
Well, I've proven my worth then. Good. That's good. Okay. All right. We can move on. Pat asks, how does UID collect consent for the email addresses they collect? And does CCPA enable users to disable, delete, or unsubscribe from identifiers like UID? This might be a down in the weeds privacy question.
Yeah, I can try to answer this. So I don't know, have on top of my head the actual detailed specs for UID2, but I think the thinking is, and that comes out of the REARC group, and it's part of accountability, is that you need consent to collect any data. This includes a login as well. And obviously, if you are, if you're in California, you have to write as a user, like me here in San Francisco. I can say, I don't want you to use my data, don't sell my data. So that needs to be looked at. So any identifier that's created falls under that legal role and needs to be, accepted if the user opts out. I don't know what the detailed specs say, but I'm pretty sure that the accountability will force this. And as the UID2 goes over to Tech Lab, where they are the ones who created all these beautiful things around CCPA support for the industry and for GDPR support, that will be a key part of this. I do remember the big slide from UID2 that actually had there a piece that was very big, was consent. So I think it's really important. It's a good question, and it's something that we absolutely make sure that we have that, because that's where the trust of the user is. If we're not doing this, then the users will not give us the IDs that we need to have.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Heinz. Well, that's my cue that we are nearing the 10 a.m. mark with the slide being shared. We are, like I mentioned, a global technology company, and we did have some questions come in from APAC in a written form because they couldn't attend. So I really would like to address at least one of those. Tom Lackey from Resonate asks, as an industry, what have we learned to date from the Google Flock origin trials? And maybe Durbin, you can take that one, and also maybe talk a little bit about just what Google Flock is, just for context for everyone else.
Sure. So let me give a little bit of context and what it is first. So Flock stands for Federated Learning Cohorts. It is a approach that Google is trying out, or it's a set of different approaches that Google is trying out in the browser, in which the browser tracks all the websites that you go to and then uses that to classify you, the user, into one of a set of different cohorts. And it then shares that information with anyone who's making contact with your browser, any company that's contacting it. And so, as I said, there's several different approaches that they're testing out which one do they want to go with. The idea being that instead of sharing a third-party cookie where a specific piece of information can then be connected together, instead shares one cohort ID that could be that this is someone who's interested in sports, or this is someone who's interested in fast cars. There's a bunch of challenges here. One, it shared a whole bunch of information. While it's anonymized and reduced down to a single ID that's shared amongst many different people, it is sharing a bunch of information about all the places you went to. And so that's sharing information that on your browsing behavior, which is a little bit difficult to square with trying to make your browsing history much more private. There's a lot of publishers that don't like this. The publishers, one of the things they disliked about third-party cookies is the feeling that the activity on their site is getting leaked through the system, as Heinz mentioned earlier, and they will opt out of any of their websites being part of the data going into Flock. I think users who are particularly interested in their identity and their privacy, and who would do things like block third-party cookies, will likely also want to block the Flock ID. Google's also having some trouble working out the consent here with the opt-in process, for example, which is why they have been much slower to roll it out into Europe versus being able to roll it out into the US. In terms of what we learned, at the moment there's a bunch of testing going on. The only real feedback that I think Google has given right now is a set of tests which they referenced several months ago, where they claimed that one of those tests managed to get to 95% performance compared to the rest, or compared to using third-party cookies. But that had very, very little information on it, such as how many tests were they doing, what were the details of that particular test. So it's very hard to say what is the actual performance of trying to swap out third-party cookies with nothing other than the Flock ID.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, so we are right at time, I think. We have a minute. First, I would really like to thank our experts. Thank you, Durbin and Heinz, for taking the time. It's always a pleasure to chat with both of you. Thank you to the audience, of course, more than anything else, for such engaging questions and for staying with us through this webinar. If you have, I actually see that there are a few unanswered questions. We will publish a follow-up Q&A blog where we will try to answer those. But if you have any further questions or comments, please email us at innovate@quantcast.com. And just want to highlight an upcoming webinar. We are going to talk about how you can innovate your ad campaigns and really turn audience insights into action. And it's going to be led by Neha and Ellie. So please join us on July 21st at 9 a.m. Thank you once again for attending. And I guess we are done here.
Thank you.
Thank you.